All right. Well, Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome back from lunch from your kitchen. And we'll get the afternoon going here. And I believe we are going to start with item 20. And that would be the discussion of review of the COA Procedures Manual. Administrator Cheryl Hickey and Analyst Michelle Bernardo will introduce this item. Ms. Hickey, will you begin, please?
Sure, I'm happy to. This is, I thought, when you look at the Committee on Accreditation Manual, it was adopted in 2010, and here we are, 2021. So it seems appropriate that we should probably take some time to just review it again and adopt any necessary revisions, make sure that it's still aligned with the way the committee works, or make any changes that you might want to make for moving forward. This document is mostly provided to you when you become a new committee member, and it's available on our website. And I check it occasionally if there are issues. For the most part, the processes are pretty well established, and we run via Robert's Rules of Order and that kind of thing. So, but I did want to take some time to look at it because it is pretty old. It even has our old logo on it. So that's one thing that needs to change, is we need to put our correct logo on it. So I thought that we could either at least have a chance to preliminarily have some conversation about this and some things you might have thought of as you were perusing it for probably the first time in a long time. Give us some direction, and Michelle will be the one who will kind of take charge of this document and make some changes. The other thing we could possibly do is have, 2 or 3 members who would be willing to kind of work with us over the course of the next couple of months, just to make sure as we draft some language, we can, bat it back and forth to see if it sounds like it would work. So it'd be great to have a couple of volunteers who'd be willing to work with us on that. Some of the items on this are, of course, set in stone. They're either in Ed Code or they're, things that have to happen. But there's some other things that don't. So if we want to kind of go through it just quickly, obviously there's some areas where the committee is organized in a certain way. There's certain things in Ed Code that we have to follow, but there's nothing in Ed Code that says there has to be 2 chairs, for instance, but it's the way we've always done it. And I think it's the way everybody likes it, but I think this is the time, for those kinds of things that we want to have another discussion about. So we have the purposes of the manual, organization of the committee, and then the roles and responsibility. That section there is primarily what's in Ed Code for the most part, but we want to take another look at it, see if we're missing anything. What the committee powers are, rules of order, kind of those kind of things. So a lot of the things that are on the first page of the table of contents will probably not change too much. It's really I think the later part of the procedures manual that we could really delve into and see if there's any changes to update it according to what we currently do. How we do presentations to the COA, the minutes, travel, which we're not doing at the moment. But, maybe even, some of the subcommittees, whenever we need subcommittees, we want to think that through a little bit. We haven't had to use too many subcommittees lately. External relations, so there's things about communication. I'm sure we have done a lot more with our website since this was originally done. Conflicts of interest, if there's anything that has bubbled up over the years. There is... just some various things that I think we just need to tweak. Like I said, I think a lot of it will remain the same, but it just seems like an appropriate time to kind of rethink this and see if there's anything here we want to change. So that's it for me in terms of a presentation. It would be great, though, if by the end of this, we can identify a couple of committee members that we can work with to help us as we draft some language at your direction.
You have a few who've already put their names in the chat.
Awesome.
Sherilyn and Mike have already have.
That's great.
Offered. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Was there anything, Cheryl, that was on the front of your mind, or any PSD members that was like, oh, yeah, we need to look at this? Is there something we can, some focus that you might provide?
There is not anything in particular. It, it just is I think part of it has held up really well, and other parts of it, I think is more discretionary in terms of how the committee wants to go. But, it just, there's nothing that stands out. Maybe the conflict of interest section, we want to really take a look at, not that what constitutes a conflict of interest changes, but maybe how we operate when there is a conflict of interest. So for instance, for a long time, if you had a conflict of interest with your institution, you would still stay at the table, you would just be quiet. Now, in more recent years, our general counsel has counseled us to, that member should really step away from the table if it's your site visit. So those kinds of things we might want to just look at again and make sure that whatever's in here holds up to what we're currently doing.
Mike?
Yeah, I'm just curious if there needs to be some language potentially on virtual meetings, virtual visits, and whether that's going to be more of a, potentially permanent part of the committee's work, or if we think it's actually just going to get back to normal.
I think that's a great idea. I think at some point we will be back to normal, as you said, but I think the options for virtual visits, so right now we're operating under the emergency order from the governor's office that allows us to set aside things like not saying what your actual address is every single time we post a meeting. Otherwise, we'd have to, under normal Bagley-Keene, we'd have to say Kathy's address and Jerry's address and Jo Maline's address. And it'd have to be open and available for the public. But the governor has kind of waived those pieces for COVID. But I think, we probably are in a world where moving forward. And so I think that makes a lot of sense, is to think about that.
I believe you mentioned at one point, Cheryl, that if an institution had a history of having successful site visits and accreditation rulings, that they may be given the option of a virtual visit.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just based on their history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that may be something that goes into the handbook rather than this, but yeah, let's think that through. I think that makes sense.
Anybody else have any thoughts or ideas about this? Cheryl, if people curl up on their couch in their warm fuzzies and take a look at this later, is there an official way they can provide feedback to either to the subcommittee or to you, or do we need to wait till the next meeting?
No, we don't need to wait till the next meeting. I would say, because this is just work in progress, I don't see why you couldn't just email both Michelle and I, as well as Mike. And who was the other person? I'm sorry.
Lynn and Cheryl.
Great. That would be great. And then, we could even call a little subcommittee Zoom together to kind of just go over stuff if we need to, or we could do it via technology. Yes.
I'm sorry, Cheryl. I just wanted to add a little bit of context. Our visit is coming up in October. Mm-hmm. And, we've been talking to our provost's office, and, even though we don't know necessarily how open the campus will be, there are going to be a lot of, steps for people to and hoops to probably jump through to get on campus. Mm-hmm. So, mm-hmm. That was kind of our thought in, asking about would we have that option.
Right.
That being said, we don't know what CAEP is going to do about that or anything of that nature. So mm-hmm. That was just, kind of what our concern was, because even though we might be open, just, getting people on campus, then the travel advisories, do you have to prove that you've been vaccinated, so on and so forth.
Yes.
A lot of hairy things.
So we do have more information to share with you about CAEP, because we've had conversations with CAEP recently. So we do have more information on that. So I'll set that aside for a minute. But we haven't actually announced or made a decision about the fall visits, but it's looking more and more like we're going to have virtual visits, or at least the option of virtual visits, because of where we are with the vaccine and where everything. We have not announced that to the world. We haven't we've just been playing it day by day, just like everybody else, trying to kind of follow what's happening with COVID. But I do know that institutions are opening up, or at least it sounds like they're opening up. The CSU sounds like they're opening. Now, we have that to consider as well as the safety of our teams. So, so I think at this point we're still watching it maybe for a little while longer, but we know you need to know the answer. Now, as for CAEP, we've been told by CAEP that they are happy with the way the virtual visits have gone, and they're thrilled to continue the virtual visits. So I would bet, Kathy, that your visit will be a virtual visit. We have more information. And in fact, Miranda and I think Erin, you were on that phone call with CAEP, and myself, we can talk to you after about that, since you're the only CAEP institution in the fall of next year. So.
I think
the third one, third time's a charm, right?
Carrie, go ahead.
I wanted to just point out that this specific procedures manual is really about each of you and how you interact in a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
It's not actually about the accreditation system and how Cheryl runs it as the administrator of accreditation. That's really the handbook that you also adopt. Mm-hmm. And just to put, I think something in your minds, because I think we need to think about it over the next couple of years. In addition to the fact that technology has worked fairly well now, maybe some of our visits should always include technology. Maybe for some very small institutions, maybe only the consultant and the team lead should travel, possibly. That's one thing to think about. That would be a handbook thing that you guys would all think about. Mm-hmm. Another little bit longer term topic, now that we have more outcomes data, completer surveys, performance assessments, it was always the commission's intention to think about when would an institution have a different type of accreditation activity? If they've had 4 years of solid TPA data and the survey results are positive and representative, maybe their program review is somehow different, or maybe how that program interacts with the site visit is somehow a little different. That's actually a commission decision, which would amend the framework. So there's actually the possibility over the next number of years to look at modifying the procedures manual, the handbook, and the framework. So don't worry, there's going to be lots of things to think about modifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cheryl.
I think in addition to COVID-related items, something that I'm interested in is external relationships, because I see this as increasing among all segments, with K-12, with in the intersegmental IHEs. And so I'm really interested in that portion of the handbook. And being proactive, I guess I should say, with the media and with other external groups that maybe in the past haven't engaged us as often, because I wonder if that will start to increase, especially as shortages may roll out.
Mm-hmm.
Pressure on, kind of like what we see happening in healthcare. Mm-hmm. Do we really need nurses with credentials?
Yeah. Yeah, as Terry said, there are a number of documents that we rely on, our foundational kind of documents, the handbook, the framework, and the procedures manual. We are, as I've been mentioning at many of the COA meetings we've been kind of told that we really should put more things in regulations. And so we're kind of working towards that. The procedures manual I don't see as being something that's in regulations, but certainly the framework is going in regulations, and the handbook, I don't know. That we need to talk about that, but we're working towards that. We're trying to get more of the preconditions in regulations. We're trying to get more of the references to the standards in the regulations, so that we are protecting the commission.
Well, and just to follow up, I mentioned it because I've been approached by some media asking about credentialing, in the context of the shortage. And of course, I can speak or not for myself as an institutional representative of my institution, but if you're also asked as a member of the COA, how do you respond?
That's an excellent point. I
think that's a really good point. Mm-hmm. And our general counsel has helped us understand no one member of a committee can speak for that committee. The majority, when you have a quorum, the majority makes a decision. Mm-hmm. So really the wisest thing is I can't speak for the Committee on Accreditation. is always your best response on that topic. But I think that's probably not in the manual, and I think we should add it.
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that at all.
Not only would I not dare to do so, especially the way things get manipulated in the media with sound bites and so forth, but I think it would be helpful to have it to be explicit in the handbook.
That's an excellent point. I had not thought about that, but that makes sense.
Kevin, did you have a comment?
It was just to the prior discussion and consideration of using the Zoom meetings, virtual meetings as part of the accreditation visits. I was trying to reflect back on, because we were not too long ago in the process. In fact, we were probably the last in-person visit, because we went into lockdown the week after. But it would have been super helpful if if some of our school partners could have joined us remotely rather than traveling to campus.
Right.
And so in revisiting everything, and I like Terry's comment, and I think somebody else made it earlier, that a precondition of accommodations may be that you've had a couple of really stellar reviews, but then allowing institutions a combination of face-to-face and virtual, and there may be instances in which a face-to-face would be appropriate and required. But and thinking to some of those induction programs, and thinking about Cal State LA this morning with 26 programs, just the coordination of that, and the number of, and rightly so, there's this big reliance now on partnerships and connecting to organizations and individuals within the community, that some combination of face-to-face and virtual may lead to a better, more thorough, with really good broad-based input kind of review.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Thank you, Kevin. I was just asking if Anaheim is ready and up, and we're going to close out this item.
So it sounds like we have a subgroup that we can work with: Anna, Mike, and Cheryl. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And so we will start really delving into this. We probably won't bring it back at the March meeting because it's so soon, but probably the one after that, we'll be able to talk more about it.
Just for clarification, did I hear you say it was Anna? I noticed it's
I think it was Lynn.
Cheryl, Lynn, and Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Say that again.
Cheryl, Lynn, and Mike.
Okay, Lynn, I missed you. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought I heard my name, and I was like,
Sorry.
I wanted to volunteer, but I wasn't quick enough to the draw.
Okay. I apologize, Anna. It's Lynn.
No worries.
All right, great.
Okay. Oh, hello, Ms. Roby.
Wonderful. Okay.
We don't have everyone here for Anaheim yet, Gay. You've got your team lead, and there's one representative from the institution.
Is that Diana?
Yes.
We still have 3 minutes, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
No last thoughts? We're all good?
I did have one thought related to the use of virtual and so on. It also provides, and I know this is a low priority, but it does provide some cost savings, I think, in an era when budgets are super tight. And so our meetings and other meetings and site visits and so on, I imagine it would be a rather substantial cost savings to have some of those be virtual rather than paying for travel.
That's a good point. It certainly has saved the commission resources in a tough year. You know, one of the things Terry didn't mention, since we have a minute, is that the number of, on our budget, the number of substitute applications is way down. And, you know, that's a good chunk of resources. So, you know, hopefully those go back up as, you know, schools reopen and there's a need for substitutes. But anyhow.
There actually has been a need for substitutes. It's been very, very difficult. On the upside, I have enjoyed learning how to teach virtually. I get my feet right in the shoes of those teachers, and that's been fantastic. It really reminded me actually how much I love teaching and why I'm here. But at times, as a site administrator, I can't be teaching and attending to other things. And so I really wish there were more substitutes out there who were willing to do the virtual teaching, but it's really hard. It's challenging. All right, well, it looks like we are ready to go with item 18. And thank you, Cheryl, for that. I think we've got our thoughts stirred up on that and send you some ideas, you and the subcommittee.
Thanks to Michelle, because she'll be working on it.
Yes, thanks in advance, Michelle. All right, item 18 is the report of the accreditation team to Anaheim Union High School District. Consultant Gay Roby will introduce this item. Joining her today is team lead Barbara Severance and institutional representatives Jackie Counts, Director of Cambridge Virtual Academy and Innovative Programs, Diana Fujimoto, Anaheim Union High School District Curriculum Specialist, Billy Schwartz, Induction Consultant, and Regina Powers, District Librarian, Induction Support. Does anyone need to recuse themselves? Ms. Roby, will you begin, please?
Certainly. Erin, we just received this text that said the system is not letting Jackie Counts in. So you keep eagle eyes out for her if she appears, please.
I will.
So I don't know what it means that the system won't let her in, but hopefully she'll make it.
And what's that? Okay, thank you.
That's, thank you very much.
Okay. Who?
Yes.
Jackie
Counts, who was program director and oversees the program.
I'll watch.
Thank you very much. So Anaheim Union High School District hosted their site visit in October of 2020. One of the 3 or 4 visits that were postponed from April when the world turned upside down with the pandemic issues. And we were fortunate enough that all 3 of the assigned BIR review members were able to continue with this visit. So we moved forward quite seamlessly and smoothly. There are a couple of aspects I'd like to mention before we get started with the report. I think this might have happened the same week as Cheryl's visit. We got started at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, and at 10 o'clock, a wildfire broke out to the hills just east of Anaheim Union High School District, and district employees whose homes were threatened were immediately released and sent home. And by about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the smoke was so heavy throughout this entire geographic area that the district office closed down and sent people home. Fortunately, with virtual learning, and the teachers were able to get on. But I wanted to note that we had one credential analyst who stayed at her desk in an empty district office all by herself to be interviewed. She took off her mask. She said, "I'm the only one around." And her colleague was being driven home by her husband so that she could be hands-free to answer our interview questions while she was driving along the side of the road. So kudos to them, true dedication to the process. And then secondly, I wanted to mention that under the distinctive leadership of Superintendent Mike Matsudo, and if you've been around a lot, you will remember his name. He was once Anaheim Union High School District's BITSA induction director when he was chosen to become superintendent. And the district has embarked on a one-of-a-kind collaborative partnership that involves their district, 2 community colleges nearby, a UC campus, as well as the city of Anaheim. And together they have all pledged to support each student in their college or career path. And it's represented by the 5 C's program. And the 5 C's are referenced throughout the report. So we wanted to give you some contextual information. The 5 C's are creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, communication, and compassion. And they are the fundamental aspects of their Anaheim Pledge, which ensures that current students will receive both academic and career counseling starting in junior high school through admission into UC Irvine after a trip to community college, and as well as job skills through internships with the city of Anaheim. So hopefully I'll give you a little bit of understanding of what are the 5 C's. The findings were determined after a very thorough review of documents presented and interviews conducted. The site visit team members interviewed 71 stakeholders representing 12 different groups. They collaborated on the things that they learned throughout the day, and they made findings based on consensus understandings. And I'd like to return the report over to the team lead, Dr. Barbie Severns.
Thank you, Gay. And Anaheim, it's nice to see your faces again. And good afternoon to the Committee on Accreditation. I really am pleased to be able to be with you on, for at least us here in the Central Valley, a very, very rainy day yet again. So it's nice to get that rain coming down finally. To really give you some of the contextual background as well, and the why we came to the conclusion for the recommendation that we did. Because you're merely reading that final report, the full picture of their program really just is not visible. They have developed a program strongly connected to the district's focus on those 5 C's that Gay described to you. And their portfolios, the candidates' portfolios, highlight video examples of student work that demonstrates the positive impact that the program has on student learning outcomes. As the team was reviewing documents and work samples both prior to the visit and during the visit, program leadership was consistently available to provide additional documents that we sought. They were open and honest when components related to the standards that were met with concerns or not met were not available. Before our final report out, program leadership had already begun to formulate plans for meeting those standards. While the program does have gaps in both program and common standards, those areas overlap. Use of the CSTPs as a roadmap, and we acknowledge that that is a very important component, but the use of them and assessing the work of the mentors and that continuous cycle of improvement are identified in both sets of the standards, both program standards and common standards. We unanimously agreed upon their importance as a foundation of the program. However, we also agreed that the impact candidates are having on student achievement that was documented in their portfolios and in videos of what they had done, that really is showing an impact on student achievement and provides a partial balance of the gaps. We acknowledge that the CSTPs do not drive the ILP development and that growth on the CSTP is not a component of the recommendation of a clear credential. But as was stated by district leadership, we did see an overlap. The district is aligning their efforts throughout the district, and that overlap helps to ensure that candidates are meeting district and site initiatives while also completing induction. They're not getting a double load of work to do. As the one person said, induction doesn't pile it on them, it helps them navigate through it. But I think having that bit of a contextual background of where they're at helps you understand that our recommendation of accreditation with stipulations. Do you have any questions of me?
Thank you, Ms. Severns. Appreciate the report. At this time, we will invite the institutional representatives to briefly comment about the visit. And we remind you that this is not a time to dispute the report, but rather to provide your thoughts about the visit and how it went. And then we'll invite the committee members to ask any questions.
Thank you, committee. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diana Fujimoto, and I am a lead curriculum specialist and induction coordinator for the Anaheim Union High School District. Unfortunately, our director who oversees induction was having some technical difficulties, so she apparently wasn't able to log in. But I would like to begin first just on behalf of AUHSD. I'd really like to thank Gay Roby for her support. throughout the accreditation process, really her guidance was key in helping us complete the required cycle of activities and prepare for the virtual accreditation visit. As they pointed out, I also like to recognize our team in AUHSD. Despite the fires and COVID, you know, we moved forward. And then, of course, I'd like to thank the accreditation team, Barbie Severns, Roxana Stern, and Anna Marie Villalobos, for really being our critical friends and conducting, you know, as they said, a very thorough review that really allowed us to see our induction program through a different lens and, you know, just reflect on the steps that we need to take to ensure that we are providing a high quality standards-based induction program for our candidates. And then if I may, just after reading the report the team gave to us, we immediately instituted changes to address those standards that were not met or met with concerns. So for example, to address standard 3, we added a CSTP self-assessment tool to the ILP so that candidates can identify their strengths, their areas of growth, because we know that the CSTP is the roadmap for the candidates' induction work. The tool is now being used to support the ongoing reflective conversation between the candidates and the mentors. And a final assessment against a continuum of practice to measure their growth will be conducted at the end of their induction experience. We've also developed a mentor practice placemat, and that serves as the instrument for outlining clear expectations for our mentors. And we introduced this placemat at our last monthly workshop with the mentors. The instrument will be used for reflection on their mentoring practices, and it also will provide support for individual mentoring, you know, challenges that they might be experiencing. So they have, our mentors have already submitted a mentoring goal based on their initial self-assessment. And then lastly, I wanted to share that we want to make sure that our program is responsive to the needs of our candidates and mentors. And so we do understand that we need to gather more than anecdotal information and have a more formal process in place. So we are currently refining our approach to for how we systemically collect and analyze multiple sources of data for continuous program improvement. So along with analyzing the annual completer data, we understand that we need to solicit feedback from our stakeholders, our key stakeholders, and that has to be done on a more consistent basis. And so we've begun to collect survey data from our mentors and candidates, you know, after each of our meetings, and that we utilize to help us improve the work that we are doing with them. So these, you know, again, I just wanted to share a few, some of the refinements we know that are going to help us improve our induction program. And again, we are so grateful to the accreditation team's work and thank them for the resources that they left behind for us that really allowed us to begin to make some of those, you know, immediate improvements. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Fujimoto. That was wonderful. I like the term critical friends. That's appropriate and accurate, and letting us know the actions that you've already started taking. I had a few questions and you answered them all, so thank you for that, and you're for that, and working so hard already to get that full accreditation. At this time, I'd like to offer is there anybody else from the institution who would like to say anything before we move on? No. Okay, yeah, any of the committee members who would like to make a comment or have a question? See, you were so thorough in your response. Truly. Okay, Member Taylor.
Under COVID, teacher candidates can push some of their credentialing requirements into induction, which would then become a critical component of their induction program, professional development. It would go to sort of tie in maybe to some of your efforts with continuous improvement. Are you seeing candidates coming in with unfulfilled components of their credentials, and how are you dealing with that? How's that going? And can you speak to that?
Yes, so we are pretty impacted, and we are seeing candidates coming in. We don't have any currently that haven't met those requirements. We do have a waiting list of candidates that will be joining our induction program, working with our HR, our team. So those are some things that, we have ongoing discussions. We definitely need more mentors because we have a high number of teachers who need to complete induction. So that is a work in progress, at least at this time.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts or questions? So this is an action item. Do I have a motion? Member Amos.
Okay, I'm going to try it again. I move that we accept the team report and the recommendation for accreditation with stipulations.
All right, do I have a second? Member Paula Tayo. We will now do a roll call vote.
Cynthia Amos.
Aye.
Jo Malene Bolatayo.
Aye.
Kathy Gracia.
Aye.
Cheryl Forbes.
Aye.
Bob Fraley.
Aye.
Mike Hillis.
Aye.
Lynn Larson.
Aye.
Anna Moore.
Aye.
Gerard Morrison.
Aye.
Kevin Taylor.
Aye.
Motion carries, and congratulations. Thank you, Ms. Severance, for your work as a team lead, and Ms. Roby for your wonderful report as usual. Congratulations to Ms. Counts, Ms. Fujimoto, Mr. Schwartz, Ms. Powers, Ms. Severance, and again, thank you, Ms. Roby.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good afternoon. All right, that takes us to, we're a little bit early for Milpitas. Do we know?
We are, and the attendees aren't here yet.
Okay, then let's see, which item, Cheryl, could we do item 21?
Item 21 is pretty weighty. Can we do 22?
Sure. Can we do 22? That would be your item.
21 is good, but I don't want to rush the 21 conversation.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to 22, which is the update on revised CAEP standards. Administrator Cheryl Hickey will present this item. Ms. Hickey, will you begin, please?
Yes. Okay. Let me open that one. All right. So the Council for the Accreditation of Educator Preparation, which is the one of two nationally accrediting bodies, has recently reevaluated their standards. They do that every 7 years, kind of very much like the Commission does with our standards. And they have a new set of standards that they have adopted, and we wanted to just make sure you were all aware of these new standards. They don't go into effect until 2022, but they do address some of the things that I think have come up in California, and perhaps some of the things that might have caused some institutions to drop CAEP. The other accrediting body, ACWIP, is also trying to operate in California, and it sounds like we may have one or two institutions even next year that may be looking at ACWIP accreditation. So we have two national accrediting bodies still interested in working in California. Remember that national accreditation is voluntary in California. They must do the California credential process, but we do try to have a partnership with these national accrediting bodies in order to help facilitate and help kind of translate California ease to some of these out-of-state reviewers, as well as to try to make it as easy as possible for institutions who want to go through these processes to try to do things at the same time when we can, to have joint visits in the case of CAEP, so that the institution isn't doing work for both, although they do, but to try to minimize the amount of duplication that is necessary. So the CAEP standards are new. I'm going to open them up right now. There's a link in the agenda item. If you have it open, you might want to open them. And I just wanted to highlight some of the things that they were trying to do. So one of the big things they talked to us about wanting to do was really to clarify language, to consolidate and to get rid of duplication in some of their standards. They added another standard on their webpage. They talk about a standard for technology, but it's really one related to resources in technology. So it's a little broader than as they describe. And they wanted to kind of be clear about their program impact statement standard and that kind of thing. So if I go through it, currently right now there are 5 standards, and they're 2022 standards. The first one is content and pedagogical knowledge, which is the same as what they've had always. Some of the things that they've tried to do is to embody more parent and family engagement in some of this standards. So you'll see that the term working with students and their families has been added to several of their standards. We have been working with a parent engagement network, parent organization network, and the National Family Engagement Project, and they have had some input into these standards. Erin, Terry, and I also provided our feedback on an earlier draft of these standards. So content and pedagogical knowledge, a lot of it is, this one is pretty much the same. It was a lot of cleaning up the language, making things a little bit clearer, but a lot of that is pretty much the same with the exception of adding things about working with diverse P-12 students and their families. The clinical partnerships, again, mostly cleanup is what they talk about doing here. They have a subcategory partnerships for clinical preparation. They have something on clinical educators and then clinical experiences. It's similar to how our standards are organized. And then their candidate recruitment, progression, and support standard, standard 3. This is, those of you who've been around for a while, this is the standard that caused a lot of angst here in California because there was very specific language about SAT, ACT, and 3.0, and there was a lot of pushback from California institutions because one, it didn't recognize that a lot of California teacher prep programs are post-bac, where the SAT score may no longer be relevant if you've got a bachelor's degree. And so they did back away a little bit of it. They still talk a little bit about aggregate cohort grade point average of 3.0, but they're talking about candidates while they're in the program. So there's a little bit more understanding here, I think, of our issues finally. And then they have the program impact statement, which is pretty standard, which is pretty similar to what they had before. They had the satisfaction to employers before. They had the satisfaction of completers before. I think they have simplified the language around completer effectiveness. And then they have the quality assurance system, which is very similar to ours. The difference between CAEP standards and our standards when it comes to program improvement or a unit assessment system is that they're much more prescriptive about what they want the exhibits to look like than we are. They have very specific things they're looking for. And then finally, their standard 6, which appears to me to be new. And I still need to spend some time kind of wallowing in these standards, but then they have a fiscal and administrative capacity, which is very similar to some of the things that are in our Common Standard 1. So fiscal resources, administrative capacity, faculty resources. So here they're very clear that they're talking about faculty that have earned doctorates or the equivalent P-12 experience. And then they have a piece here about infrastructure. The EPP has adequate campus and school facilities, and this is where the technology piece is added in. So there's the infrastructure supports faculty and candidate use of information technology in instruction. So this is really their new standards that are more streamlined, and they are working on, you know, guidance documents and those kinds of things that will be available to institutions. We need to redo now our crosswalk with our common standards. So that is work that we need to do, and we'll bring to you in the next few months as we realign these standards against our current common standards. So we wanted to make sure you knew that these standards had changed. And, you know, we know that a lot of institutions in California are kind of looking at, do I go with CAEP or do I go with AQUIP or do I not go at all with any national organization? And I think they can look forward to reviewing these to see if it kind of fits with their you know, their mission and their interest on their state level. I don't know if Aaron or Terry want to add anything more about the CAEP partnership and the new CAEP standards. I know we had a chance to look at them before they came out. And I can't see Terry. She may be doing something else that she has to take care of.
Yeah, she has her video off. Cheryl, I don't have anything to add. I think you covered all of the things that we discussed with the CAEP folks, and that we discussed in looking at their documents. So I think it was thorough. Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of work, a lot of things to consider.
It is. And, you know, I'm sure we'll get some questions from institutions that have visits coming up in the next couple of years to try to figure out. And so that's why I think we really need to get the crosswalk done very soon so that at least they have that to look at.
Great. All right. Any members have anything that they'd like to say? Member Hillis.
I'm just curious, Cheryl, that new standard 6, that's actually going back to NK days of long ago.
Yeah.
And I seem to recall that one of the reasons they got rid of that was how problematic it was for teams to compare, you know, big R1 institutions, you know, that had lots of resources, at least in comparison. And so I'm curious if there was discussion about that and why they decided to bring it back in, because it's really more of an input as opposed to an output, which was also kind of the shifting philosophically for NCAIP and CAEP.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't know exactly what prompted them to put this back in. I do think that it'll be really important to watch how they operationalize this so that they aren't, you know, one of the things that they were criticized a lot is they would, in the past, and I'm talking about NCAIP, not CAEP, they wanted to see how the School of Education at an institution of higher ed compared to another like school and to make sure that it was equivalent. And there was a lot of pushback on that because finding what is the equivalent school, you know, is it your med school? Is it your, you know, so there was a lot of pushback on that. So I think the approach they're taking here though, is that are there enough fiscal resources and administrative capacity to support the program? So similar, as at least as how I read it, similar to how we do it, you know, it's not about, you know, counting numbers, but, you know, are there issues that are within credential programs that are because they're not well supported? You know, that's my impression of this. We'll see how they, like I said, how it plays out and how they operationalize it. I haven't seen any of the supporting materials yet for these standards, but I know that they're working on them and they have some of them. So.
Great, thanks.
Great. Any other comments or questions for Cheryl?
Committee member Taylor had his hand.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Do you have a sense for how many institutions have CAEP accreditation and, you know, dual accreditation and in the interest in AQUIP?
I can tell you, so for CAEP, let me just go back to their, sorry about that. I can tell you
like 8 institutions.
I think it's like 8.
It's a pretty small
providers. I will tell you right now.
Turned on my camera and my audio also to help with this.
Oh, yay. So there's Chapman and Loyal. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, we've only had 2 actually go through CAEP. As Kathy Christian mentioned earlier, USC will be number 3. Yeah. Everyone else on the CAEP list is still in the NK legacy world, and they're still making a decision. And so we're really at 2 plus USC are nationally accredited, and we know of at least 3 or 4 that are looking towards AQUIP at the moment right now. Mm-hmm. There has been that AQUIP announcement in the PSDE news that there's a webinar happening February 10th, I believe, about the AQUIP alignment matrix, the agreement with California, but it is much smaller because we were up closer to 30 about 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Is that seen as a negative by the commission, or is it really just sort of irrelevant because we've got our standards, we're happy with our standards?
Terry always says we're agnostic.
We're agnostic about national accreditation.
Exactly. And it doesn't, we want to work hand in hand with them to make it easier on the institution, but we're really looking out for California standards and making sure that the institution's meeting California standards. So, but if an institution wants to go for either CAEP or AQUIP, they are more than welcome to, and we're happy to work with them. So,
all right. Well, thank you. I think this is just an information item for today. I'm sure it will come back around. Ms. Clark?
Cheryl, did we want to find out if there's anyone on the COA that would like to assist staff in looking at the alignment matrix? If there's anyone still interested in CAEP? And
sure.
If you are, just let Cheryl. Kathy, you'd like to do that?
Sure.
Because that way when staff works on that, it would be nice to have someone who, you've understood the CAEP world. And
well, I think I've understood the CAEP world.
All right. Thank you, Kathy.
Sure.
Happy to have some extra eyes and thinking. Great. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Cheryl. This is just an information item, and now we can go back to item 19. Is everybody ready? Which is the report of the 3rd quarterly report for Milpitas Unified School District. Consultant Roxanne Perdue will introduce this item. Joining her today are institutional representatives Raquel Kusunoki, Director of Learning and Development, and Kim Nguyen, Induction Teacher on Special Assignment. Does anyone need to recuse themselves? Okay. Ms. Perdue, will you begin, please?
Thank you. I'm not sure why my video is not showing what my background is, but I'll just go with it. So good afternoon. This item provides the 3rd quarterly report for Milpitas Unified School District's Teacher Induction Program. The Milpitas USD site visit was conducted in February 3rd through 5th in 2020, so pre-COVID. And so no, it wasn't virtual. We were on site for the whole thing. But they have the extra challenge of implementing everything during the time of COVID. So that's impacted their workload. The COA granted a status of accreditation with major stipulations at that time. As part of the accreditation decision, the COA also required the institution to provide quarterly reports, with this being their 3rd of 4 quarterly reports. So we have 1 more to go. There were a total of 5 major stipulations for the institution to address, and they're outlined on page 1 of the item. Also included on the first page is a link to the original full team report from that visit. For the prior 2 quarterly reports, we went over each stipulation along with the program's planning, their action steps, and their continued progress since the site visit. With each report, we provided Milpitas with feedback that included other areas for additional growth within those areas of stipulation. And at this point, I want to commend Milpitas because they really took notice of the feedback. And in addition to their continued work on the stipulations, they incorporated the feedback into their workload and ensured that all feedback was addressed within their current work as well. The report this time, instead of going over it point by point, I'm just going to holistically say that the stipulations have been addressed in full by the institution at this time. And so what we would want to see next is continued progress that they've made and continued evidence that they can provide towards the actions that they take for all the planning and action steps they've done so far. And so they've been really good about showing and not just telling. So more than just a narrative, they've provided us with a lot of evidentiary links that really show what they've been attempting to do. And one of the major areas that I want to highlight for you is their advisory board. Their advisory board has expanded so much in its roles and the individuals who are involved with it. As I look across the stipulations, I can see its impact across almost all of the stipulations that they have. They have official roles and responsibilities for all of them now. They've expanded to so many more members now. It's very inclusive. And they have real work for them to do now. And a lot of the continuous improvement process that we ask of them during these stipulations and that they've been working on has generated a lot of extra data for them. And while that wasn't specified, the data piece, that's really going to be useful and has already been useful for their advisory board in making continued improvement for the program. So it sets them on a good path forward, even following the end of our fourth report that we have coming up. They also have really taken a lot of steps during this time of COVID where they had to think about the step they had planned and they had planned to take action on and how to modify that to our new world environment virtually. And so they created an exit interview panel, for example, for their year 2 candidates and their ECO candidates to come through, their early completion option candidates. But all of that has to be virtual now. And they have video assignments that they created to demonstrate mastery towards the CSTPs. They have all of these activities that they had started, and then they had to adapt them to the virtual environment that we're in now. And then one of the things that was interesting to me that they even include in their report is that one of the stipulations was regarding their formal recommendation process. And part of what we've been talking with our institutions about this year is thinking about those preliminary candidates in your induction program who are being held for additional items for COVID flexibilities, like they're being held for RECA or they're being held for TPA. And so that's included in their report this time. It wasn't specified that it's part of their report, but they identified that as something that should go in with their formal recommendation process. And they took steps to have action on that happen. They have an intervention team now, which I think is fabulous for struggling candidates. And just really pleased with the progress they've made so far and hope they continue forward with it for this next quarter. With that, I want to turn it over to our representatives from the from Milpitas Unified School District. We have 2 here today, and I'm going to start off with Kim Nguyen. She's our TOSA for the district, and I think that she would like to give an overall summary of the progress they've made.
Yes, Kim? Thank you, Roxanne. Good afternoon, everybody. It's been almost a year since we had our site visit, and I feel like we made so much progress. As soon as the site visit was over and the stipulations were shared, we were really excited for the opportunity to implement the new changes for the right away. Some things that I want to highlight that Roxanne also mentioned was we created a rubric for our ILP and exit interview, and those were the things that we didn't have as part of our program. We reflected on our current practice of our exit interview. We modified it and implemented the new use of the exit interview rubric. We put together an exit interview panel, which consists of an IHE member, a retired mentor, myself, and Raquel, who's our Director of Learning Development. We calibrated together on the rubric to make sure that we had a mutual understanding of what we were looking for during the interview. We set up a virtual orientation for our teachers and mentors and introduced the interview, the exit interview process, and shared what the rubric will look like. Overall, the process of the exit interview implemented last spring was really enjoyable for all of us. It was really nice to hear the personal journeys that each teacher had during their time in induction. Since our site visit, we also created 2 teams. One group was an ILP focus group, where we collaborated to fine-tune our ILP document and looked at feedback from our teachers and mentors to refine the document. And then from that team, we kind of sparked an idea that we created, just implemented this month, called Colleagues Connection, to give our teachers an opportunity to connect with one another, especially during a time of being disconnected. We had our first session just last week, and the teachers who attended liked the idea of connecting with teachers across different sites. And then the other team that we created was our intervention, the IST, an induction support team. And this team was created to give additional support to our teachers who needed more support in meeting competency or requirements of the program. And the two teachers who participated in that really shared that it helped them stay focused on meeting their goals around the CCPs. We continue to actively involve our faculty and stakeholders in supporting the program and decision-making to better the program. We set 3 advisory boards meetings, one held in November, one's tonight, and then another in April. And these meetings have really helped make modifications and offer suggestions for the future of the program. I feel like overall the year, since our site visit, the improvement we made has demonstrated a positive impact on our on teaching and learning for all of our teachers and mentors, and therefore in our students. We received many feedback from both of our teachers and mentors this year, stating how, especially a mentor stated that this year reflecting on, it helped them reflect on their own teaching and examine the CSCPs more closely for themselves. And then Raquel wanted to share a little bit more.
Yeah, I do want to thank all of you for giving us this opportunity, and Roxanne for your support. I just want to share this year's experience. I have never experienced anything like this, where the shift and growth mindset, not just for the induction program, but those that we serve, like our mentors and our mentees, to be able to witness the changes. Because we, Kim and I, in our induction program, we had to stop to reflect on, revisit, and then redo things we thought we were good at. And having to revisit the stipulations, and then looking back at our practice, the alignment, and then observing the transformation in not just our program, but I was going to say students, but our teachers, has been the most rewarding experience next to being a classroom teacher. And I'll tell you why. Initially, when we started to develop our induction program based on the new standards, our focus was on the participating beginning teachers. This year, we had to shift and put our focus on our mentors, who are the heart of the program. And all I could think is, what was I thinking the first time? Because they are the heart of the program, that they have much more of an impact on our beginning teachers than I could ever, for many reasons, as we know. Just my title alone was a barrier. It didn't offer the same safe place. So the transformation in our mentors to build their capacity to now want to be part of the induction program by wanting to be a mentor again was the evidence to me that the shift happened, not just for me and Kim, but for all of us who took part of this induction. And again, it was an authentic learning experience for all of us. I feel like this year really went by fast. I thought it was going to be a long, painful experience, but it wasn't. And even the pandemic didn't stop us. We were really focused, and we were really intentional. I never used that word intentional the first time, but we were really intentional this time, stopping, pausing, reflecting, and thinking about why our program existed to begin with. And seeing the capacity in our teachers. It's been a very rewarding experience that I'm truly grateful for. And for our beginning teachers who have been part of the program, for us to be able to use the 2 years or even 1 year for some of them to model for them. That experience is going to remind them what it means to be flexible with your student, what it means to mentor your students, because they themselves were students in the induction program without really knowing it. So being able to give them an experience that is relevant to their classroom is the most meaningful learning experience, where you're going to see the impact. What is the bottom line? Our students. So it's been a great learning experience for all of us, and I couldn't be more grateful for the time for making us do this. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks to both of you for all that information on the progress that you've made and provided for us in the report. Thank you, Ms. Purdue. That was a lot of information to digest. I'm thinking even about your effort for mentor retention and what that says to you for what you're doing for your mentors. I even was thinking about, it brought to mind the Petra cycle. It's you're like doing a different version of that, implementing and thinking and growing, and not using the pandemic as an excuse to slow down, but as a way, taking advantage almost of a little bit of extra time that we get in the day because we're not traveling or whatnot. And your passion is really coming through in your conversation with us today to make program improvements that are not just beneficial for your mentors and your teachers, but for yourselves and the program overall. So thank you for sharing that heartfelt report. Really appreciated. At this time, I'd like to offer the opportunity to the committee members to say their own comments or have any questions for these wonderful people here. Member Forbes.
Well, I also just wanted to express my appreciation, especially to you, Ms. Gwen, and you, Ms. Kusanowski, because, the way that you just spoke from the heart was so meaningful to illustrate what it means to engage in continuous improvement, not just checking the boxes of accountability. So that tells me that not only are your mentors fortunate to be in that kind of a climate and context, but also the new teachers and their students. So, I just really wanted to applaud you for that, and thank you.
I too would second Cheryl's comments. It's a huge responsibility taking on a program like this, and without the commitment to continuous improvement, folks shouldn't be getting into this game. And it's not just about the reports that get submitted, it's about your attitude day in, day out, and that's what should get you accreditation. And you can hear that commitment in what you're saying, and I appreciate that. It really is something to be taken very seriously, and I certainly get the sense that you are bringing that level of attention to what needs to be done to keep your program at the top of its game. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a few words to say? Okay. Well, this is an information item. However, the COA could vote to accept the third quarter report for Milpitas Unified School District. And Cheryl, you had recommended we do that with an earlier report. So I'm going to say let's go forward. Do I have a motion? Member Fraley?
Sure, I move that we accept the third quarterly report for Milpitas USD.
All right, and I have a second from Member Forbes. Can you do a roll call vote, please?
Cynthia Amos.
Aye.
Jomeline Bolatayo.
Aye.
Kathy Gracia.
Aye.
Cheryl Forbes.
Aye.
Bob Fraley.
Aye.
Mike Hillis.
Aye.
Lynn Larson.
Aye.
Anna Moore.
Aye.
Gerard Morrison.
Aye.
Kevin Taylor.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries. And we just want to thank you again and congratulate you on a successful third report. And we look forward to seeing you one more time in a few months. Have a great afternoon and congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
All right, that takes us to item 21, which is the update on COVID flexibilities. Are we ready for this item?
Yes. Is Terry on?
There we go. Director Terry Clark, Administrator Cheryl Hickey, and Consultant Sarah Solari Colombini will introduce this item. Ms. Clark, will you begin, please?
And I don't know that Sarah is on, but, and I, to be honest, she's been on a site visit, so she's fine. She does not need to join if she's not available. Okay, Terry, I'm going to let you kind of do most of the talking at the beginning.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Cheryl. So staff has continued to work with a ever-growing larger group. We call it our collaborative group. And you actually have a representative here on the committee because Mike Hillis serves on the collaborative group. We started meeting last spring. We met throughout the summer every Tuesday. It was our Tuesday lunch. We then took a little break in August after the commission adopted the flexibilities related to clinical practice for the 2021 year. But then we realized, oh my gosh, we need to start thinking about next year, 21-22. And so we started meeting again. We broadened the group from originally being 2 CSU, 2 UC, 2 AICCU, and 2 district intern program leaders. We added induction program leaders. We added employer representatives, both on the human resources side and the credential analyst side. We added a representative from AXA, and we added a representative from the California Teachers Association. So in December, we took an agenda item to the commission because the group had talked about, and we raised 12 different ideas, 12 different topics. And we took this to the commission in December and said, these are the things we're starting to talk about. And the first thing we really raised that was very important is we were hoping back in August when we stopped meeting that COVID would be decreasing during the school year and schools would be opening. And as we were going into December, we said, we just don't know if that's going to be the case. And so we could really see that there could be some candidates this year that actually get no clinical practice in an actual school building with children actually present with them. And the commission agreed in December that as long as the candidates are meeting the flexible requirements that the commission has put in place, even if they don't have face-to-face clinical practice, that can be okay. We know, of course, induction is going to have to shore up some things. And so we continued meeting, we continued talking, and the item that will get posted tomorrow afternoon and go to the commission on February 11th updates all 12 of those topics. It identifies the document that the people who are completing in spring and summer of 21, what should they be getting? And there are really 3 choices. A full preliminary credential if they've met all requirements. That will probably be the minimal group this time. A preliminary credential with an executive order renewal code if they still have either the TPA or RECA or RECA to do. Or a program sponsor variable term waiver, because what we're hearing is there's a lot of candidates that were accepted into the program without CBEST and or CSET. And because of the continued pandemic, they're not able to take those tests at this point in time. So there is actually looking like there are going to be candidates who complete their program in spring or summer of 21 who have not been able to even attempt CBEST or CSET, possibly. Those people would be able to get a program sponsor variable term waiver, get a job, and as the options for CBEST and CSET continue to be a little more flexible, and or as the pandemic recedes and we have more testing capability, they would be able to meet the requirements for CBEST for basic skills and subject matter. So that's item number 1 out of 12 topics. There's a lot of additional discussion about induction, including the IDP that goes from the preliminary program to the induction program. The item contains a list of what the group has come up with as essential components to every IDP. And if the commission has agreement that those look like the essential components, we'll be working up a program sponsor alert. We'll be sharing it with all preliminary programs, all induction programs, all candidates. And we will be encouraging all preliminary programs to adhere and address all of those concepts this coming spring in their IDPs. We also talk about support for induction programs, and there's a lot of resources that are being pulled together, collated, organized on the induction webpage. Another big topic in this COVID item has to do with the issue of communication. If you remember, in October of this year, there was a letter that came out from State Board President Linda Darling Hammond, the Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurman, and Dr. Tina Sloan, the chair of the commission. And it was all about, we're in this together. It's not only IHEs that prepare people, it's a community of educator preparation, and we all need to work together. So the idea was another letter, hopefully coming out maybe even as early as March, from all three of those agencies again, updating the field. What's happened this year in teacher preparation? What kind of supports are these new hires going to need in the fall? Things like that. That's only one arm of the communication plan that the group has talked about. They also talked about communicating with all LEAs in the state, districts and counties, things to think about as they do their onboarding planning. Because we know every district has an onboarding process that takes place. Once they decide who they're going to hire, they have specific steps they go through, often involving some meetings for the new hires before other teachers are on site, things like that. And it's not that we're trying to tell districts what to do, it's that we're hoping to educate districts to say, here are some things you might want to think about as you're planning onboarding for 21-22. And a third communication level has to do with site administrators, because we know the site administrator is the school site leader. And what happens at a school site comes from that site administrator. And we want the site administrators to also be knowledgeable about what's happened in teacher preparation this year. What kind of skills? The group has identified certain TPEs aligned with the CSTP, where this year's candidates are very strong usually. Things like teaching using technology. They had a lot of practice at that. Things like engaging students and having a variety of skill to be able to pull students into lessons, individualizing instruction. On the other side, there's a number of skills in the TPEs that the candidates have not had a lot of time to practice, such as actually getting students to physically move from a whole class setting to small group, and from small group back to some other type of setting. So we've tried to identify for site administrators, employers, induction programs, the areas where in general, the new teachers will be very strong and will need some extra support. Additionally, the group has continued to talk about the fact that resources, these candidates have been stressed. The current teachers are stressed. Current site administrators are stressed. And in some ways, some of these candidates are going to need to do some additional work. And we don't want candidates inappropriately impacted negatively fiscally because of this. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of answers for that. In the governor's budget, as I shared this morning, there is some money planned for residencies and classified. That's really looking at new incoming candidates. It doesn't really look at our current candidates. So we don't have a good answer on that topic at this point, but we agree in the item, we need to keep focused on this and we need to keep thinking about it, because it's not appropriate for candidates to be unilaterally impacted negatively by this. We've all been impacted hugely negatively by COVID, but how do we try to reduce these impacts? Cheryl and Sarah, what are some of the other components that I may not have brought out quite as much in my overview? Anything you'd like to add?
I was trying to follow to see which ones you hadn't talked about, and I don't remember if you mentioned the importance, the heightened importance of the individual induction plan. I think you mentioned it, but I think the group was really, when COVID hit last year, we were right in the middle of having this conversation with the field about how the individual development plan coming from the preliminary programs either wasn't getting to the induction programs, at least not on a consistent basis, or candidates didn't really know what it was. They didn't know that they had to take it with them and talk to their induction program about it. And so there was really, we were already talking about how to strengthen that. We included it now in our program review process. We want to see the template for that. But the group really wanted to spend a lot more time saying, hey, this document is more important than ever in how it translates into the induction experience. And so, so they have spent a lot of time thinking about what should at least the common things be. They don't have to, it doesn't have to be an exact template, but there should be some commonality in all the individual development plans that come out from preliminary programs that feed into induction programs. So that has been a really big source of conversation, as well as making sure that everybody rallies around these induction programs in the next few years, so that they have enough support to support their candidates that are, or the new teachers that are coming out that have specific needs based on where we are in this COVID situation. So that's the other thing I think you mentioned it, but I just wanted to highlight it a little bit more.
Mike, as a member of the group, would you like to say something about the work we've been doing? Because you put in a lot of time on this, and we really appreciate all the group's thinking, because the item is the benefit of everyone's thinking in the group.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would mention, because of Terry and Cheryl's great coverage of the things that we've been talking about, one of the things that I think has really kind of arisen from my perspective is that issue of cost. And it's a really difficult issue, obviously for candidates, because we don't simply want to add additional courses or something to help support them. But on the flip side, to be able to subsidize that completely from the institution standpoint, especially in the midst of, decreasing revenues and whatnot, that puts us in a difficult place. And then working with our partners within the districts, they don't always have the expertise to do some of the things like the teaching performance assessment work. And so, that's still a very complicated issue that I think is going to have to be borne out. And I would agree with both Terry and Cheryl about the importance of the IDP. That has consistently arisen to the top of our discussions because we want to really make sure, and one, highlight the assets that students are coming out with, because we do think that they're going to come out with some assets that perhaps candidates in previous years may not have gotten, but then also to be honest about how that IDP can really help guide districts and schools in that induction process, so that we're really making sure that we're continuing that support. So it has been a lot of work, but it's actually been very fruitful as well, I think.
I think we had a member Krisha.
Oh, hi. I'm sorry. I have a rather granular question. I'm going to put my credential analyst hat on for a minute. So, when we're looking at the standardized testing and how the flexibilities revolve around that, of course, CPR is not a standardized test, but yet, one of the requirements is that it be in person, but then that's an OSHA requirement, not necessarily the credentialing requirement. Right? Okay.
Exactly.
So I guess, my question is, I know that some districts require in person. LAUSD is an example. They actually say that they want them to be in person. So for the, when we're doing the credentialing, when we're talking about actually making sure that the candidates get their CPRs, either in person, our part for USC, we've kind of been saying, you can't really get it in person. So we've been letting them do those hybrid courses. Is that, I'm just wondering how the real world sees it.
Yeah, the commission's requirement actually is that it is an American Red Cross or American Heart Association approved course. There are online courses that are approved by those. So for credentialing purposes, we will accept those online courses. The other thing about the variable term waiver is if they need another year to complete CPR, they can be put on a PSVTW.
Okay.
CPR is identified as a remaining requirement, and they could therefore go out and get a job.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
There. Ms. Solari, did you want to add anything to this?
I think Terry touched on the importance of the regional networks. I think the group also discussed that the regional networks were really going to be even more important during these times, just because of the work between induction and pre-service and connecting them. So, but I think Terry, I think you spoke to that. So
I did come up with another thing I was thinking about, is because not only has our group talked about the regional networks, but additionally, I'm trying to get this, the Field Coordinators Collaborative Group, which is a cross-segment group. It has UC, CSU, and AICCU institutions involved. We had met with that group in October, and they have come up with the idea also that they think regionally in the state, getting preparers and employers together to be able to talk about things and find commonalities would be so very powerful. That during COVID, it was very clear that different employers have different requirements. Some won't let you, as a student teacher, attend, in the spring at least, you could not attend a Zoom class. Some will not allow recording. Some will not allow this. Some will not allow that. The idea that if regionally, the employers, the preparers, the induction programs all could talk to each other, they could really fine tune some things and make it much less labor intensive. We had field coordinators in October reporting that it took at least twice as long to place a candidate. And in fact, one coordinator said about 40 hours of work making phone calls to place one candidate. And that's just not sustainable, because you have more than one candidate. And if it takes you a full week of full-time work to try to find a placement for each candidate. So that's another area that people above and beyond the collaborative group are even saying, we really think communicating across the segments of preparers, employers, induction is really powerful. And so that's something we want to help support. Staff has had conversations with staff at the Department of Ed and at the State Board of Ed, and both of those entities are very supportive of this idea of a new joint letter and of the idea of regional collaborative cross-segment meetings so that preparers, employers, induction programs can come together and find commonalities. And it's not just any one of those entities that's responsible. We are all responsible to ensure that educators are well prepared, ready to start their jobs, supported well in their jobs so that they're effective. Because it's California students. We need them to be well educated to take over, and that way they can pay when we want to retire.
I was just going to add that the agenda item that we've prepared, that is the joint thinking of this collaborative group, should be on our website by the end of the day, I think. Or not today, tomorrow, the end of tomorrow. So, you know, I think if you want to delve into it tomorrow and really take a look at what's there, I think it's really important for us to keep up our, we had talked earlier about working with the field really closely in the office hours and that kind of thing. And just keeping our ear to the ground to hear what are the challenges that continue to exist. And one of the things that really struck me personally thinking about this is how long in the future these issues are going to remain with us. You know, this may be, you know, 5 years down the line, you still have people who are trying to finish their EO, you know, their either the GPA or the so it's with us for a little while. So we really need to work closely with the field and make sure that we are thinking about every possible option, or, you know, how we can work together to address this, because our shortage was already bad going into COVID, and we don't want to exacerbate that anymore. So we'll have an opportunity to hear what the commission has to say. This is an item for discussion and then action on the PSVTW piece. Yeah, so any additional thoughts you may have?
Member Morrison, I think, has a comment, and then Member Taylor.
Yeah, I was just going to, you know, give a personal experience this year. I've had a student teacher working with me all year, and I just feel, you know, so bad for this experience as student teaching, just having to come to grips with a brand new learning management system that the district introduced, Canvas, which he knew nothing about. Zoom, he'd never operated before. All our classes were remote. He was trying to do things that he'd learned to do in a physical class that just weren't working on the Zoom. And, you know, he got through it. Today was his last day, actually, ends of term today. But I just feel that he's going to be applying for his credential, and I don't think he's had the kind of experience that we all had, and that we hope that our student teachers are going to have before they go out and teaching in their own classrooms. And I don't know what the answer to this is. I know some of the things we're doing are just practical things that need to be done, but I think we're going to have a whole group of people who have been shortchanged on the experience that they're going out to get as teachers.
Member Taylor, and then Member Larson.
Thank you. Yes, Terry's comment about her example of someone struggling to find a placement for a student teacher. It's something that, having worked in teacher education in 3 different states over the last 25, 30 years, the quality of your teacher preparation program is severely limited to the quality of the placement experience that students have. In these sort of cross-section collaborations, if discussion could be focused on ways in which school districts are, you know, they are made to realize and live up to the expectation that this is a shared responsibility, and that that, you know, there needs to be an investment for both sides, because when leadership in the school district supports having student teachers, you get great placements, everything works well, but leadership change, and then a budget crisis, and they're hunkered down, focused on you know, essentials, and then all of a sudden the quality of your placement starts to slip a little bit because there's no support to those teachers doing that critical work of that Jerry was talking about, working with teachers. And now more than ever, with students, with candidates going out with deficiencies from their credential program, it needs to be this partnership. I speak every month to our local superintendents and say, look, it doesn't matter where your newly credentialed teachers were trained. If they have deficiencies in their credential that need to be addressed, you let me know, and I'll send someone out. I'll find the funding. I'll send someone out to work with that teacher, because we're all in this together. And we just need to find ways to build into our systems ways to remember that. It's easy for everyone to appreciate that at this point, but somewhere down the road, we need to be reminded of that.
Thank you, Member Taylor. Member Larson, and then Member Forbes.
I've been supervising interns all year this year, and have seen the front lines of some of the amazing challenges that our teachers are facing out in classrooms and special education settings, trying to meet the needs of students with special needs in remote learning, and have been just amazed at the resiliency of these teachers and interns for being able to provide incredible instructional environments for students, even through remote learning. I've also been struck by the variance that there is between each district. Each of my interns are in 3 different districts, in terms of the support and in terms of how I'm able to come in and do supervision in each of those settings. So in one district, I'm welcomed into the live Zoom sessions. In another district, I have to watch a recording And in another district, it has just been a challenge trying to get in and observe these classrooms. So I think, you know, the talk of having more regional communication moving forward about how remote supervision can happen. We see these models coming into play more, you know, with systems like Sydney and Go React and things like that. So having guidance from the commission about how that can happen and how that can be translated then to the district so that there's some consistency and so we don't have to fight to be able to see our students that we need to observe.
All right, Member Forbes.
Well, first of all, yes, yes, yes to what everyone just said, and an exclamation point. But I think one of the interesting developments for me recently is our multiple subjects candidates have now been able to start attending sites in person. So this is the first time, as of yesterday, as a matter of fact, or Tuesday, our student teachers were in their schools. And so it's been fascinating to hear the difference in their reflections, because I was seeing some pretty sophisticated teaching going on in the remote context. They're not quite catching up to that yet face to face. So some of their original perceptions were like, oh my goodness, these children are so tiny. They look really big on the Zoom window. They don't know how to cut. It took an hour to cut something out that the parents would have cut in the previous lesson. I didn't so they're learning a lot. They're definitely learning a lot, but it's not what I would have anticipated. And thank goodness for teachers. You know, I applaud all of the teachers here who have made this work, moving our student teachers around on a laptop while the children are there face to face in some cases, you know. I'm not convinced that's a very good way for us to conduct, you know, that they're going to really get a rich experience through that kind of a hybrid modality. So we're video recording all of their student teaching observations this year instead of having supervisors face to face. So we'll have some data to look at to make those decisions. But I also kind of wanted to support, because I know many of you have heard me on my soapbox in the past about the TPA and my concerns moving forward with the TPA into this remote environment. And so I've just about finished teaching our university's TPA preparation type course. And I think most of our candidates are going to actually implement the TPA. That surprised me. So I'm curious, you know, the other IHEs, if that's the case. I suspect from what I've seen so far that they may be successful. Just, you know, having gone to some of the, at least for the Ed TPA, the California coordinators meetings and seeing the examples of TPAs that have passed and so forth. And so that I think is somewhat of a positive, but I'm very concerned about last year's group that didn't finish the TPA, probably much more than I am even about this year's group. So we had, especially some of our teachers who hadn't completed the TPA were hired as not on probationary contracts, and so they weren't served by induction. They were hired on temporary contracts. The district doesn't pay for the induction, at least for the people on the temp contracts in the district that, you know, in this particular case. And so the teacher didn't sign up for induction, was trying to figure out, do I do the TPA on my own? What do I do? You know, and so even thinking about, you know, these systems that I, you know, really agree with everything that people have said about how important these regional partnerships are. There's still some people, especially from last year, who may be falling between the cracks. So even though there's no budget line for that, I think it's going to be, first of all, a burden on them financially. And secondly, I'm just concerned about if they keep waiting, they're going to be the ones doing the TPA in year 5, right before, and maybe they'll have had more experience, and so it won't be as onerous as it might have been. But I've become a lot more concerned about that group and a little bit less concerned about some aspects of our current candidates.
Wow, that's really highlighting some things that, you know, not being in the IHE world at this moment have really have been on way in the back burner, and that's a lot to be concerned about. And I think you're right. It's going to be years. We're going to have to figure out some kind of new tracking system to figure out what box can we check. I mean, I don't like that term, but to make sure they satisfy requirements that have been decided upon as being essential requirements for being a good educator. and what are alternative means for satisfying those requirements as time goes on? Such, for example, at year 5, is it a moot point? I don't know, or I don't know. Wow, great questions. Co-Chair Frelly, I believe you had your.
Yeah, just a quick couple of comments following up on Cheryl's comments about the TPA. Many of you know I'm pretty involved with the TPA, working with Amy Rising. My role is the lead assessor and trainer for Cycle 1 and Cycle 2 in music. And we have seen quite a significant reduction in the number of TPAs being submitted across the board. We are busy training new assessors and recalibrating the old ones. And we have weekly meetings that the leads do with reps from Pearson and also CTC, Amy's work there, where we discuss these kind of issues and we look at the submissions and we're seeing what can we do within the assessment guides to make things clearer to the candidates? How can we better support them with the ever-changing environment, knowing that this online teaching is not going to go away. Even when we do come back face-to-face, it's still going to be present. So there are discussions that are ongoing that even for the following year, work is being done now to set up in better situation for the fall of 21, for those candidates. So it's a never-ending process, but you're right. Those candidates who didn't complete it last year, they're kind of caught in the middle. And I've got a few at Chapman myself who are kind of standing back and still haven't done this Cycle 2. They're kind of waiting to see if it's going to open back up. And some of them have jobs, but they can't get the time to do their TPAs. But I can say that the CTC has been very, very supportive of that throughout the process. So, I mean, that's just my perspective on things, for what it's worth.
It's worth a lot. Okay. Ms. Clark.
I was so sad hearing what Cheryl was saying about the candidates, the new teachers that are on temporary contracts, things like that. Induction varies so much across the state, and every LEA makes its own rules as to who can enroll in the district's induction program. The commission, from Amy Rising's staff in the performance assessment through Karen Sacramento working with induction programs, we've tried to be extremely clear. No new teacher or candidate should be ever attempting a TPA without support and guidance, whether that's still from their preliminary program or from their induction program. So we just need to double down on that guidance. We've talked about that a little bit in our collaborative group. Oh, I neglected to mention, hopefully he wasn't listening, I'm certain. Chair Tina Sloan appointed David Simmons, one of the newest commissioners, but he's been working with the commission forever. He's a human resources professional in the Goleta School District down along the coast. He also joined our collaborative group. And as a person who works on hiring a lot of people, he has experiences with that also. One of the other cruxes, real challenges we're coming with is that this year's completers, if they don't complete by the end of August, the executive order is set to expire at the end of this coming August. And the executive order is what allows us to push the TPA and the RECA to the clear credential. So we are monitoring very carefully. We're having conversations because to push that needs legislation or an executive order. And it would probably happen with additional legislation. Because right now people are looking at, if I have a completer who finishes after the EO is not available, say they finish September 3rd, they are only going to get a program sponsored variable term waiver, which only gives them 1 year. But they have a CBEST, a CSET, and maybe a TPA and or a RECA. So we really want everyone to understand that as long as a person is making progress on their waiver, the entity that requested the waiver can always ask for another year on that. They would have to say, yes, this person has made progress in this way to get that additional waiver. But we also are still continuing to talk with the entities in the state to say, are the provisions of the executive order maybe needed a little longer than just August of this year? Maybe they're needed to the end of December or something. So staff will continue to monitor that. Our executive director is having conversations with state board, with the Department of Finance, with the governor's office. We're really trying to be as proactive and quick as we've tried to be since March, when this just all went bottom sides up on us. And so it's going to change. Where we are now is where we are now, but I just keep hoping that with the vaccines, we hopefully get a lot of improvement. We get some schools opened. These student teachers do get some time to be actually in a classroom so that it's not a shock to them in September.
And it strikes me, you know, we talked about the communication that would come from the three entities. Well, and listening to all of you, you know, one of the strengths of California is that education is at the local level. One of the challenges is it's at the local level. So, you know, hearing, you know, Cheryl, you talk about the thing that Terry brought up, which is, you know, on a temporary contract, can't get into induction. Or Lynn, when you talk about all the different ways that you know, this being able to do remote observations is one way over here and a different way over there. And you're not, early on in this process, we heard a lot about how student teachers weren't able to access the technology platform because they weren't employees of the agency. I think that's kind of, they figured that out. You know, the way around that, people were saying, oh, I just have them get a substitute. But it feels to me like so much of what we do is trying to get around things rather than try to solve it, you know, systemically. So it's real important for all our agencies to work together to try to figure out, are there systemic solutions to some of these challenges that, you know, we're all trying to deal with on the local level. So I think to the extent we can kind of communicate that in some of the communications, I think would be really helpful. I have no idea how to put that in a letter, but we'll work on it.
I like that, how you said, you know, that rather than trying to find ways around things, really being solution oriented. Mm-hmm. You're hired. All right. Anybody else want to add to that conversation? Lots to think about. And Terry, I kept hearing you say, well, we're going to. I'm like, well, wait a minute.
You know, that's Sarah Solari has joined Cheryl. And so Cheryl and Sarah will just pick up the work and move it forward. And I've already told them, you know, we're in a pandemic. I can't go anywhere. I'm still actually going to be around in February. And therefore, it is possible that I will still be brought in, you know, to provide some additional help on some topics because we aren't going anywhere yet. Executive Director Sandy, I see you've joined us. Would you like to say hi to the committee?
I've been lurking for some time. So hello, everyone. It's good to see you. And I really have appreciated this conversation you've been having. It's been quite an effort to collect and reach and, you know, articulate the results of this collaborative work. And it's been so important to do so. It's really been good to hear your voices added to it as well. So, hey, everybody.
Thank you.
I'll give you a flavor of one of the other topics we talked about. As we got into the IDP discussion, that you go from the preliminary program to your induction program, we had to have quite a discussion of when should an employer be thinking about those IDPs? Mm-hmm. And the employer community would like them as soon as possible because it would help them make some decisions. The induction community is saying, you know, this is a document between the preliminary program, the candidate supervisor to help inform their induction program. So we had a very lively conversation and we came to a consensus that what we are going to recommend in the communication is that employers should request the IDP at the time of onboarding when they've made the decision about hiring someone. And at the time of onboarding, they should be asking that new employee for a copy of the IDP. And that can be done independent of induction because we have people that run a single district induction program. So the employer and induction are very close. We also have consortia induction programs. So the intricacies and complications of every one of these topics for the 1,000+ school districts, 1,800 if you want to count all the charter schools, the 1,800 different districts, the different bargaining associations, the different induction programs. It's enough to give anyone a headache some days, but I know Cheryl and Sarah are going to do a really good job with continuing the work. It's important work.
Dun, 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 dun. I see it now.
There's no pressure whatsoever.
Right, Member Hillis.
Yeah, I'm just really curious. I hadn't really thought about this before, Terry, as you brought up this last point. Would there be anything legally preventing a district for asking for an IDP as part of the application materials?
The commission has no answer to that. Every district puts up its own application process and requests what it requests. So as far as I know, there would be nothing prohibiting it. That's one of the guidance things that preliminary programs were concerned about, putting too much in a document if it could impact their completers' ability to get hired, but they want an honest document, which is why I think the group came up to the consensus of, let's really encourage employers to say this is part of onboarding. This is not part of application. If the person has the credential, you interview. Some of the employers are going to add a question during their interview about, talk to us about the types of clinical practice you had this year, because some of the people may not have had much in person with children. But no, we can't tell districts what they can or can't do. It would be nicer some days if we could, but yeah, we don't.
Member Forbes.
Well, I think one of the concerns also was we would consider the IDP to be part of the student teacher's academic record. And so under FERPA, we can't transfer it, because there was a request at one time that the IHE actually transfer the IDPs to somebody. So I think, FERPA would prevent that. And that also addresses, I think, some of our concerns about like what the possible unintended bad consequences during hiring, right? Putting somebody at a disadvantage. But if the document belongs to the candidate, and so they're the ones that own that document after they leave us, and I guess a district could ask for it then.
And, for us, it's an actual part, like an assignment. So it is, pretty much part of their academics for us.
Yeah, it is for us as well. Otherwise, they might not finish it.
Yeah, there you go.
Whew, that's good conversation. Lots to think about. We could, looks like Joy is, Dr. Spencer is with us. All right, let's go ahead and start this meeting. Welcome, Dean Spencer. Glad you could make it.
Thank you. Good to see you.
So this is our item 16, which is the accreditation report of the site visit team to University of San Diego. Director Terry Clark will introduce this item. Joining her is team lead, Dr. Cynthia Grutzik, and institutional representatives, Dr. Heather Herrera, accreditation coordinator, and Dr. Joy Spencer, dean, as well as other representatives joining us from USD. Does anyone need to recuse themselves? All right, Ms. Clark, will you begin?
Thank you, Co-Chair Moore. So I'm pleased to bring you the report from the University of San Diego's accreditation site visit. The team was in Zoom rooms for a number of days at the end of October. Luckily, our visit was not impacted as much by the fires as Cheryl's visit. Our two visits took place the same week, and it just happened to be where our team members were located. And Cynthia Grutzik is my team lead, and I'm going to turn it right over to her.
Well, hello everyone, and I'm glad we've had a few minutes to just sit together and let me orient to this group again. It's been a few months since I was before you. I want to begin by thanking the team at University of San Diego, starting with Dean Spencer, who welcomed us so warmly and provided a lot of great context for us. Thank you to Heather, who worked so hard to help every little thing and every big thing really signify And thanks to Reyes Quesada, the Director of Teacher Ed, who was so helpful throughout the visit. And then all the others, Sandy Pasinski, Wendell Callahan, and Erica Cameron, Bobby Hansen, and then lots of others, faculty, staff who met with us, alums, students. And then I want to say thank you to the members of the site team. Small but mighty team. We had Keith Walters, Lori Kirchie-Reed, Dennis Eastman, and Michael Salsi. And then, of course, a special thank you to our wonderful team consultant, Terry Clark. I felt so honored to be with you, Terry, on your last site visit. So thank you for that privilege, whoever made that happen. I've worked with Terry for so long, and this was just great to do this again. So I'm going to make a few comments just about overall how the site visit went, and then some comments on what we heard and learned in our interviews, and then to share our recommendations with you. So first of all, the site visit went really, really well. We felt that it went as planned, and we felt that it was organized and scheduled in such a way that allowed the team to hear about and to verify that the program and common standards were being addressed, implemented, and met. Like all of us, USD was doing all their teaching and supervision virtually due to the pandemic, so our visit was, of course, 100% virtual using Zoom. And I want to make some notes here for future reference, and also because, as a longtime participant in site visits and CTC accreditation, I've come from the binders and tabs days to virtual document review and now virtual site visits. So I'm really interested in how these processes shape our observations and findings, and on how to improve our capacity as reviewers. These changes also require new things of institutions, from having someone on board who can build a dynamic website that works at every click, to having someone managing the visit who's really a new kind of project manager, organizing groups of people and individuals into all these Zoom meetings. We each had our own Zoom account, and Heather figured out all this stuff. So, as you can imagine, there are pros and cons that we reflected on as a team. The pros outweighed the cons, surprisingly. I think it was very well organized, for one thing. We still felt completely welcomed, supported. We felt the flexibility that we needed. We had the tools that we needed. We each had a Zoom ID, and we used Google Docs for all our notes. And even me, who loves to have the posters all over the walls of the team room, I used Google Docs to do that activity too. Tech support was prompt, all these things were in place. And then through the interviews, we really felt that we heard what we needed to hear. So that was really successful. Zoom was good for the steps in advance of the visit too. We had a pre-visit meeting with all of this team. We had pre-visit meetings together, and we might even have had more contact through Zoom this way than we would have otherwise. I can remember phone calls before. So I think that's a really strong feature. And I don't know if this is true, but it seemed like maybe interviewees might have had an easier time getting to meetings, through Zoom, rather than driving over after school or missing some teaching time or something. So there were a lot of things that went really well. I think the main drawbacks are what you would expect, that it was very 2D. When you're in a room, you see you pick up nuances and context and informal conversations with people that help you add dimension to the observations. And then, of course, not being on campus, especially a beautiful campus, but also it lets you see the resources and experiences that students have literally when they're walking onto a campus and walking through a building, and what their learning environment is. That really is such an investment on the part of a college and a campus. So not seeing that is, of course, a drawback. And then I think just the informal time with the team, if you've been on a team, that there's a lot of downtime where you're just chatting about stuff and you process stuff. And I think all of that is important, and it's we made up for it in other ways, but just to note that as something let's not get too used to this Zoom stuff, because I think there's a lot to be gained from being together in this work. The other note I want to make is that although the report states that 4 programs were reviewed, the way that USD offers their programs means that our report really has 2 sections: the teacher education or the teacher preparation section and the PPS school counseling section. And that's part of what I want to comment on. So just to share some comments on what we heard and what really stood out to us, and we mentioned these things in the report too. For every program, we heard from alums who are positive about how they were prepared to enter the field. They commented that they loved their professors. We heard lots of accolades for that, and they learned while they were at USD about building a community of teaching, about cultural relevancy, about change making and social justice, and that their practices today are really shaped by their experiences at USD. We heard from a cohesive group of faculty who form a caring community focused on the formative process of learning to be an educator, and who are dedicated to supporting and serving students from the time they enter the programs all the way through and into their careers. It was really interesting to hear about the new dual credential program. And in fact, this section of the report was jointly authored by both reviewers of the Gen Ed and Special Ed programs. We had to think about that. How do we report on this when it's really, how do we honor in our report the structure of the program at the site? So, yeah, it was co-authored, and in my institution summary, I called this a true common trunk delivery model. And it really, I believe, serves as a strong example of how this can be done. It took a lot of inclusive planning that we heard about, a lot of curriculum work, and most importantly, a shared commitment to the concept, practice, and value of inclusive teaching and learning. This program combines 2 credentials, multiple or single subject and ed specialist, into one program that can be completed in 12 intensive calendar months, or within a longer period of time if an MA is added on, or if things just take longer for students. And we heard about how the faculty collaborated to revise or actually create all the courses in the program to integrate the content and TPEs for both credentials. So they really went back to square one and built it up from there. And the older courses and programs are being phased out. Kind of as we were there, this process was going on. Candidates take all the courses together and participate in a sequence of fieldwork that increases in hours as the semesters progress, and then engages candidates in alternating gen ed and special ed settings. So for all candidates, the final student teaching is completed in one area or the other, and then they're recommended for that credential, and then they add on the second student teaching experience and are recommended for that second credential. And most candidates choose to do that. It's possible for candidates just to end up with one credential if they choose, but most candidates are really sticking to that whole process and intent. With a relatively new field placement coordinator position, which was actually filled just before the COVID closures. And so the person in that position, walked right into this new kind of placement process. So the program is still working out the logistics of placements in both general ed and special ed classrooms throughout the program, but this is really a promising direction. A highlight of the PPS program in school counseling is the way practicum experiences and coursework are blended through small group placements with an instructor. And we heard from candidates and alums how successful this is in helping them feel prepared for the field. And it's clear that the PPS folks have long-standing relationships that they've built over time with many alums in the field as well. So have these highly effective learning experiences for their candidates. That's just a snapshot. We outlined more in the report, but based on the fact that the team found that all standards for the preliminary multiple and single subject, preliminary ed specialist, and school counseling credential programs are met, and that all common standards are met, the team recommends accreditation. The team also recommends that the institution submit a 7th-year report to ensure that improvements in process that have recently been put in place continue to support the programs and candidates. So the 2 areas we are suggesting be addressed in this report are that the institution verify consistent implementation of the new procedures related to clinical practice placements, training for supervisors, and inclusion of supervisors in program improvement for the dual credential program, and that they strengthen the process and systemize the collection of feedback from employers and community partners. So that is the sum of our report, and I'll turn it back to Terry.
And it goes back to Co-Chair Moore,
who will at this time say thank you so much for that terrific report. It was a lot of information, very thorough. We would like to invite the institutional representatives at this time to comment on the site visit and the report. Just a reminder, it's not a time to argue the findings of the team, but just to clarify or ask, add to the report or insight from your site visit.
Great. Is that my cue?
That's you. You're up.
Thank you so much. First of all, Terry Clark, thank you, and Cynthia and the entire team. You know, one thing that impresses me always here at USD and in the Department of Learning and Teaching and in counseling, we take our work very, very seriously. And while this was a moment for the department to come together and think hard about things, they do it all the time. And so it seems like what you have seen and noticed is what is part of the practice of this place. And so just on behalf of us, I want to thank you. Thank you for being so thorough. Thank you for helping us to have things to think further about and to dig more deeply into. We have placed equity and diversity as central to our work, and it has been that way for so many years. And given this moment in our history as a nation, you know, we will continue to do that work because we can't teach children well, we can't counsel children well unless we are on board and doing this work and the deep thinking that is necessary to get us over this mountain that we have to get over. So just on behalf of that, I want to thank you. And we would never argue those results because they were so great. So thank you so much. Also to our chair, Reyes Quesada, to Bobby and to Heather and to the rest of the team, Amanda. So thank you so much for the investment. When the pandemic has subsided, we will celebrate for real. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
I will leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anybody else from the institution? Dr. Quesada?
Yeah, again, thank you to the team, to Cindy and Terry for your guidance throughout the last year. Again, the whole process just made us look at our own programs and look at the data throughout the few years in our retreats to really hone in to see what we could do as a program, as an institution, to make sure that we served our teacher candidates as well as our faculty. So the team was professional, they detailed, they flexible with changes that needed to be done, and obviously the dedication was also always there. And again, I can't thank our faculty enough, especially Bobby, Sandy, and Amanda, for having to put all this together and provide the support for the faculty. And I also just want to thank the COA, as I know your important role in reviewing all the programs that are approved by you, as well as setting policy. It's great to my 8 years in the COA, I always kept thinking there's going to come a turn where I'm going to be on the other side, and boy, I hope we better pass and or get accredited. So I'm glad we did. So Anna, I think you were still there when my last year, as well as Bob was there, and Jomeline. I think those are the three that I recall, and then others were coming in. So I know your role is important in making sure that California has the best educator preparation and counseling and admin programs in not only California, I think nationwide. And Terry, it's been great working with you. 25, 30 years, I can't say how long, but it's been great with your leadership in COA. So thank you very much.
Terrific. Thank you for your kind words. Anybody else from the institution?
I'd like to. My name is Dr. Erica Cameron. I am the department chair for counseling and marital and family therapy at the University of San Diego. And so on behalf of the school counseling specialization, I just want to thank Terry and Cynthia and the team for their insightful questions. We believe as a faculty that it helps us going through this process to really think about our work. We do it and we care and we're passionate, but then to articulate it helped for us to really reflect and to grow and to be able to articulate what it is that we do. And so we appreciate this process and all of the work that all of you do in order to ensure that we are doing right by our students as well as our communities and schools. And so thank you for the opportunity and for all of your hard work.
Thank you, Dr. Cameron, for your comments. Anybody else from the institution? All right, I will call on any committee members at this time that might have questions or comments on this site visit and the report. Well, very well written report, and everybody fill in the blanks for us. That's what happens when we have really great reports and a great team. And if there are no comments or questions, then we do need to vote on this, and it's an action item. Do I have a motion? Member Morrison.
I move that we accept the team's recommendations of accreditation with a 7th-year report.
All right, and a second? Member Forbes. Time for a roll call vote.
Cynthia Amos.
Aye.
Geraldine Bolatayo.
Aye.
Joe Moline. Sorry, Joe Moline. Kathy Grisha.
Aye.
Cheryl Forbes.
Aye.
Bob Fraley.
Aye.
Mike Hillis.
Aye.
Lynn Larson.
Aye.
Hannah Moore.
Aye.
Gerard Morrison.
Aye.
Kevin Taylor.
Aye.
Motion carries. Congratulations. Yay! Round of applause. Well done. You can now breathe a sigh of relief and move on to your next Zoom. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and all your hard work, to the site visit team and to Terry Clark for ending this day with us with this great site visit report and team. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Terry. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you, Mary.
Jake, we already shared with them that you will be the consultant that works with them for the 7th-year report that needs to be done by next January. So sometime between now and then, Heather, Jake will communicate with you and you'll work on that process.
Yep, I look forward to it. I like working with Jake. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
All right. Whew. Well, that takes us to public comment. And does any member of the public have anything they wish to say? Please raise your hand in the chat feature and we will wait a moment to see if we have anyone indicating they wish to speak. A reminder to keep your comments to 2 minutes.
No hands are going up.
You can finish off the meeting.
Thank you, Co-Chair Fraley. And Terry, I won't prolong the moment any further. It's hard, but we're super excited for you. I think you got that and really appreciative. So having no further business, I adjourn the January 2021 committee meeting of the Committee on Accreditation. The next meeting of the committee will be March 2nd, 2021. Best wishes, stay healthy, stay vigilant. I hope you all get your vaccines soon. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for a good meeting. Thanks.
Thank you.